continue to express that you are disheartened by the characterization of your conversation with Nafisa Collier. Just again, seeking clarity. Did you in fact say that Caitlin Clark should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything? And do you actually feel that way, that without this platform, players like Caitlin Clark wouldn't be making what they do off the court?
There is a moment in every industry, in every institution, in every carefully constructed system of power, when the people running that system realize they waited too long to change. They see it coming. They feel it building. They hear the warnings in board meetings and private conversations and leaked memos that never quite make it to the right desk at the right time. And then, one morning, they wake up to a number that makes everything they thought they knew about their business completely obsolete. For the WNBA, that morning arrived with a $150 million contract. Not a rumor, not a think piece from someone with an agenda, not social media speculation from anonymous accounts looking for engagement. A fully guaranteed 5-year contract, complete with a signing bonus that reportedly exceeds the WNBA's entire salary cap, an ownership stake in a new league, and a private jet waiting on a tarmac to make it all official. And the player who signed it was Caitlin Clark, the same player who single-handedly pulled women's professional basketball into the mainstream conversation, who sold out arenas that were half empty before her arrival, who drove jersey sales to record numbers, who generated enough television interest to justify a $60 million media rights deal that the league's own commissioner publicly celebrated. The same player who was still flying commercial. This is not just a story about one athlete making a smart financial decision. This is the story of how a 27-year-old institution, built on the assumption that its players had nowhere else to go, collided head-on with the reality that the world had finally built them somewhere else to go. And the collision is going to reshape women's basketball in ways that nobody, not fans, not analysts, not executives, not even the players themselves, fully understands yet. But we are going to walk through every piece of it, because the details matter enormously, and the details tell a story that goes much deeper than one contract. To understand why the Clark signing carries the weight that it does, you have to understand what Project B actually is, because most of the coverage has treated it like a competing league. A rival operation trying to steal the WNBA's market, share the way a new coffee shop tries to steal customers from the one already on the corner. That framing completely misses what is actually happening. Project B is not competing with the WNBA for the same audience in the same markets with the same format. It is building something structurally different from the ground up, designed specifically to operate in the spaces the WNBA was never equipped to reach. While the WNBA was having internal debates about whether it could afford charter flights for its athletes, Project B's representatives were sitting in European palaces, holding quiet, deliberate meetings with the patience that only comes from having access to a $10 billion war chest and absolutely no pressure on their timeline. While Cathy Engelbert was talking about sustainable growth and incremental salary increases, Project B's talent scouts were attending WNBA games, watching carefully, taking notes, building dossiers on every significant player in the league. And while all of that was happening quietly in the background, Clark's agent boarded a Saudi-owned private jet at a private terminal, red-stamped contract in hand, with lawyers and financial advisors alongside her, and reviewed a number that was not the $50 million figure that sports media had been floating around online. It was $150 million, fully guaranteed, 5 years. With an ownership stake that gives Clark not just a paycheck, but an actual voice in how the new organization is managed and operated. When that information reached the WNBA's front office, we are told the response was an emergency meeting called at 4 a.m. by Commissioner Cathy Engelbert and NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Silver was reportedly demanding to know, loudly and furiously, how a single player could be worth more than a significant portion of the entire league's valuation. How they let this happen. How they got here. And the answer to that question, Commissioner, is both simple and devastating. You got here because for years, the operational assumption inside your league was that loyalty was free. That players would accept what they were offered because the alternative was nothing. That the WNBA's cultural significance was enough compensation for the gap between what it paid its players and what those players were actually worth on an open, competitive global market. That assumption was not malicious. It was structural. The WNBA held a monopoly on professional women's basketball in the United States, and monopolies do not naturally develop habits of paying market value when there is no market. They pay what the absence of competition allows them to pay. Project B did not just offer Caitlin Clark $150 million. Project B created the market that proved what Caitlin Clark was actually worth. And once a market comes into existence, it does not go quietly back into the box. Let us be specific about the financial reality here, because specificity is what makes this story undeniable. The entire WNBA salary cap for all 12 rosters combined is currently sitting at approximately $5.65 million. Clark's reported annual Project B salary would represent more than 5 times the total payroll of a single WNBA franchise. Her signing bonus alone reportedly exceeds what the WNBA pays every player on every team in the entire league combined. Project B's structure goes even further. Their model offers star players $1 million per game in base compensation, with an additional $50 million payout for players who win the tournament championship. To provide the necessary context for those numbers, the highest-paid players in WNBA history have earned approximately $250,000 for an entire season. Project B is offering more money for a single game than some of the greatest WNBA players who ever lived earned across their entire professional careers. These are not numbers that exist on the same scale. These are not numbers that can be compared through the usual framework of, well, the WNBA offers other things, intangibles, legacy, cultural significance. These are numbers that represent a completely different economic universe, and Caitlin Clark just moved into that universe with a signed contract and a Boeing 747 waiting to take her anywhere she wants to go. The Boeing 747, by the way, is not just a symbol. Reports indicate that Project B's charter fleet was custom retrofitted to include spa facilities and a full-size basketball practice court. The organization that asked Clark to accept commercial flights while building its brand on her name is now watching her board a plane that contains a basketball court. The symbolism does not need interpretation. Here is where this story expands beyond one player, because Clark's signing is not the end of the story. According to sources close to the situation, it is the beginning of a cascade. A'ja Wilson, by nearly every analytical and statistical measure the best basketball player in the world right now, 2-time league MVP, Olympic gold medalist, the architect of back-to-back championship runs in Las Vegas, is reportedly deep in negotiations with Project B, not exploring options, not taking exploratory calls, negotiating. There is a meaningful difference between curiosity and negotiation, and sources indicate Wilson has crossed that threshold. Breanna Stewart, a 2-time WNBA champion, a former league MVP, one of the most complete players the sport has ever produced, is described by sources close to the situation as having mentally checked out of the WNBA. That specific phrase deserves attention because it describes something more final than financial consideration. Wilson negotiating is a decision process that can theoretically be interrupted by a competitive counteroffers. Mentally checked out means the emotional decision is already made. The math is complete. The conversation has happened at the level that matters most, and what remains is only the formal announcement. And then there is Reese, who has constructed one of the most powerful social media presences of any athlete in women's sports, whose audience of millions tracks her every post and story with the kind of engagement that most brands spend years and millions trying to manufacture. Sources indicate Reese is already using that platform to hint at an announcement she describes as one that will change the game forever. If that announcement is what the current trajectory suggests it might be, Project B will not have merely signed another basketball player. They will have acquired a media distribution network with a built-in, passionately engaged global audience. Every fan who discovered the WNBA through Reese, every follower who came to women's basketball because of her personality and her story, will follow Reese to wherever Reese goes next. The league that built those fan relationships through years of investment in personalities and narratives now faces the possibility of watching that investment walk out the door and directly into a competitor's hands. Project B understood something the WNBA apparently did not account for. In the modern sports media landscape, audiences are loyal to athletes before they are loyal to leagues. The asset is the player, not the jersey, and they move to acquire the assets accordingly. It is important to be precise here, because this story is not about Cathy Engelbert being a villain. It is not about the WNBA being a corrupt organization that deliberately chose to exploit its players. The reality is more complicated and, in some ways, more tragic than a simple story of institutional bad faith. The WNBA has operated for 27 years under genuine financial constraints. Women's professional sports leagues have historically struggled to attract the kind of investment that makes competitive salaries possible. The arguments for sustainable growth, for incremental progress, for building slowly on a foundation that would not collapse under the weight of overextension, were not invented as excuses to underpay players. They reflected real economic pressures and real institutional risks. But there is a critical difference between explaining why something happened and excusing the consequences of it. The WNBA's financial structure was built on the assumption that its players had no alternative to accepting what the league offered. That assumption was used, consciously or not, to justify compensation levels that had nothing to do with the actual market value of the players involved. And when the explanation for inadequate pay is, there is nowhere else for you to go, and then somewhere else appears, the entire structure built on that explanation collapses simultaneously. Engelbert's reported reaction to Clark's signing was described as furious, not surprised. That distinction carries enormous weight. Furious means she saw the vulnerability. Furious means the possibility had been raised internally and not addressed with sufficient urgency. Furious means someone in the organization understood that Project B was a genuine existential threat, and the countermeasures taken were not sufficient to address it before the most consequential player in the league's recent history chose to leave. The reported WNBA counteroffer tells the whole story of how unprepared the institution was for this moment. Marginal salary increases, a promise of charter flights for next season, and an appeal to legacy and the importance of being part of something historically significant. Against a $150 million fully guaranteed contract with an ownership stake and a custom 747, the legacy argument is not a negotiating position. It is a goodbye speech. What makes Project B genuinely threatening rather than merely financially competitive is that it is not operating on the WNBA's terms at all. The WNBA model is a domestic American professional league with a traditional season structure, city-based franchises, regional fan bases, and domestic television partnerships. That model works effectively when it is the only model available, when players have no choice but to accept it or leave professional basketball entirely. It works because it was designed in an era when the alternative to playing in the WNBA was playing overseas for significantly less money and dramatically less visibility. Project B operates on a completely different architectural logic. 7 global tournament events, each lasting 2 weeks, staged in the world's most economically and culturally significant cities: Paris, Singapore, Dubai, Rio de Janeiro, Tokyo. Events designed not simply as basketball games, but as global entertainment experiences, built to attract the world's highest-tier sponsors, broadcast exclusively through Netflix and Amazon to audiences across every country on Earth simultaneously. The WNBA's competitive advantage for 27 years was monopoly, being the only option, the only professional women's basketball league with real infrastructure and visibility in the United States. Monopolies set prices without reference to markets, because without competition, there is no market. Project B ended the monopoly the moment it signed its first significant contract, and once a market exists, it prices things at market value regardless of what the previous monopoly holder considers sustainable. The WNBA arriving at this moment with charter flight promises and incremental salary bumps is the institutional equivalent of bringing a firmly worded letter to a negotiation where the other side has already agreed to terms and is waiting for the plane to be fueled. The question now is not whether the WNBA will be affected by what has already happened. It will be, profoundly and permanently. The question is whether the institution can respond with the kind of speed and decisiveness that the situation actually demands, rather than the measured, cautious incrementalism that has characterized its decision-making for nearly 3 decades. Every WNBA player with a contract coming up for renewal is currently having a specific conversation with her agent. She is looking at the $150 million figure attached to Caitlin Clark's name, and she is asking the only question that makes logical sense in that context. Why am I accepting less? That question does not have a satisfying institutional answer right now. Legacy is not a mortgage payment. Cultural significance does not cover health insurance. Being part of something historic does not pay for a house when you are playing on a six-figure salary in a league that generates millions from your presence. The WNBA must now make a choice between two paths, and it must make that choice faster than it has ever made a significant decision in its history. It can find the financial mechanisms through increased investment, restructured revenue sharing, dramatically elevated salary caps, and genuine equity stakes for marquee players, to compete on a level that makes staying in the league a rational economic choice alongside an emotional one. Or it can watch the players who made it worth watching leave for a league that built its entire model around treating those players the way their talent and their market value actually demands. There is a version of this story that ends with the WNBA using this moment as the forcing function it needed to fundamentally transform how it compensates and values its athletes. There is a version where Engelbert's fury becomes the catalyst for the kind of rapid, decisive institutional change that 27 years of incremental progress failed to produce. There is a version where the league emerges from this reckoning stronger, better funded, and more genuinely equitable than it has ever been. That version requires moving with a speed and a willingness to restructure foundational assumptions that the WNBA has never demonstrated before. And then there is the other version, the version where the 4 o'clock meetings and the furious phone calls and the legacy arguments fail to match the competitive reality of what Project B is offering, where Wilson signs after Clark, where Stewart's announcement follows Wilson's, where Reese's carefully constructed social media hints resolve into a press conference that takes another massive audience with her out the door. What Caitlin Clark's $150 million contract actually represents, beneath the drama of the signing and the emergency meetings and the extraordinary financial figures, is a simple and long overdue market correction for the value of elite women's basketball talent. The players were always worth more than the league paid them. The world just needed someone to build the structure that proved it. Clark signed first. The clock is running. And the WNBA does not have 27 more years to figure out what comes next. The only question left is whether the people running this institution understand, at the bone-deep level that this moment demands, just how little time they actually have. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have taken the deal if you were Clark? Which player do you think signs next? And is there a version of this story where the WNBA comes out the other side stronger? Follow for every development as this story continues to unfold.